Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 310, In Ghostly Japan. It's a really good book, trust me, by Lafcadio Hearn, actually, who was relatively famous in his era for doing Japanese studies, folklore, poetry, things like that. An interesting fellow. He got fired from his job for miscegnation initially when he was in, I believe, Ohio, by marrying a black woman, and then they divorced, and then later on he married a Japanese woman, died in Tokyo, of all places. But anyway, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Highly recommended for anyone who's into, well, anything to do with Japan, because the literature's not all just occultism. Second and third links to my books, blogs. I'm not sure where I'll put this one, because it is a collection of different kinds of material. It's 144 pages. Again, keep in mind that because of the format they used in those days, when you drop the text size and remove double spacing, works tend to be a lot shorter. Also makes printing cheaper, which is really good for all of you because it drops the price. Anyway, this collection is fascinating. I was very interested while I was reading it. It's a collection of sayings. There's 100 different sayings, like little statements in Japanese, rendered with rough translations and then further meaning. There's a lot of notes in that section, and normally I don't do footnotes, but I couldn't figure out any other way to actually structure it and have it in line and have it make any sense and actually be readable. So I had to meticulously go through and do all that, which slowed me down greatly. There's all sorts of bizarre stories. Like the first one's about the Mountain of Skulls, and it's like a man is being led through, I guess, the spirit world or something by a bodhisattva, sort of an ascended, enlightened individual who, bodhisattva, they come back, I believe, generally and help other living things. Not a Buddha yet, but like a sub-Buddha, I believe, would be the rough idea. But anyway, he's walking over this mountain. It's like entirely comprised of skulls, and he's freaking out. And the Bodhisattva's like, yeah, they're all your skulls, though, so don't worry. You know, those are the skulls you left behind in the billions of lives you've already been through. It's kind of weird. There's another one where a woman's dying, and she calls to one of her handmaidens, and is like, well, carry me out to the garden. There's a cherry blossom out there that I want to see before I keel over. And when the girl picks her up, she slides her hands onto her breasts and literally digs her fingers into her body. And the only way to solve the situation, they had to amputate the hands of the dead queen or princess off of the girl, and like every year on the anniversary the hands would randomly move around and cause her discomfort. And apparently the whole idea is proverbial, because the term cherry blossom is also used in the sexual context for females, and if it had been like the more romantic side, not the sexual side, it would have been plum blossoms, according to Hearn. It's a very bizarre story. And there's also there's another one where a dude's basically being stalked by the ghost of a dead lover, and he's inclined to be with her. At first he doesn't realize she's dead, but then at some point, I can't remember exactly how, he sees her as she really is, and it's like she's just a wraith with skeleton hands and all deformed and rotted. There's a lot of morbidity in this collection, a lot of occultism, a lot of folk sayings and lore that deals with superstitious topics. Very popular. And this comes from a very fascinating period in Japanese history. Remember, in the middle of the Meiji Restoration. Now, at this time, Japan was rapidly industrializing. All of those old folk traditions were already dying out. A handful of people, a very small amount of literary minds and anthropologists and explorers, were in Japan at the time, meticulously documenting as much as they could. In some smaller, more rural communities, elements of these practices still remain. You're not really going to find them outside of a museum or a library if you're in a place like Tokyo. And so Hearn, what he did was invaluable, because he would go to these communities. He had actual contacts with people there that would help him translate, that would relate oral traditions that in some cases really weren't written down at all. There's the incense game, lamps that are lit for the dead each year, and there's a whole story about that, about him swimming out to see them up close and describing them in detail. It's partially a literal folkloric work, and it's partially relating the stories directly, and it's partially his explanations, notes, and so forth about stories and traditions. So it's fascinating. It's probably the best work. I've read a number of works on things like Shinto, Japanese history, mythology, stories, poetry. I think this is the best one that I've encountered so far. I'm going to be looking into some of his other works as well on non-occult topics just for light reading. If you like folklore, if you like bizarre stories, a bit of the macabre actually, anything to do with Japan or in general Buddhism in specific, this is definitely a work that you'll probably want to check out. Again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon, one of the highest recommended works that I've gone through. Second and third links to the book's blogs. I'm not sure which section I'll put it in. That's about all. Peace out.